Hello and welcome back to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind, here with a guide on how to play Austria. So, personally, Austria is one of my favorite nations in the game to play. They play a fairly different game than pretty much everyone else in the world, except for maybe like Saxony or Denmark, maybe. It's more diplomatic focused. Of course, they have to fight wars. It's Europa. It wouldn't be the same game without it. But they are slightly unique. So this is going to be a guy that quickly will go over ideas, expansion pass, essentially what to do, how to do it in early game. So as Austria at the beginning of the game, your major usual enemies are, there's probably about 3 of them that are your major threats. You've got France over here, who's got a historical rival modifier against you, which prevents alliances, at least in the short term. You have the Ottomans to the southeast, who are always going to be a problem. You have Burgundy, which, annoying for you being emperor, controls quite a bit of HRE land. I think it's 11 provinces. That is really hurting your imperial authority per month. So those are your major 3 rivals. Of course, you can rival whoever you like, but that covers rivals. So, the first thing as Austria one has to decide is one has to decide if one's going to be, first of all, very aggressive, and then one also has to decide if one is planning to reign in Italy and keep them in the HRE. Oddly enough, I don't see the decision here. Maybe it hasn't started yet. But in order to reign in the HRE, you have to control northern Italy added to the HRE. Essentially, you have to control this land. All like mainland Venice. I don't think Istria is counted technically part it, but these in Venetia here outside of Venice itself are required, as are all these ones in central Italy and Emilia Romagna. Can't say it. So that's one thing one has to decide, because that involves a lot of wars going south into the Pope's lands and Venice's lands, which is quite difficult. But the first move for an Austrian country should be, if one wants to do that, or one wants to just overall start really strongly, is to try and get unions and your dynasty spread out around the game. Because the Austrians' focus is, I say diplomatic by getting dynasties and unions, but in practice you're either really lucky with them or you're not. And 90% of the time you won't be. However, as Austria, you can cheat the odds a little bit at the beginning of the game. First off, both Hungary and Bohemia are in an interregnum, same thing with Poland. However, Poland's going to have its own event to deal with that. And Hungary is almost definitely going to have, but it's going to have an event that puts a Habsburg on the throne. But Bohemia is the unique one at this point in time. Bohemia doesn't have a ruler, and it does not have an heir, which means if we do a royal marriage with them, in a short period of time, assuming we're lucky, I might just play it forward just to see what happens, just so I can show you guys. There is a very large chance that your dynasty will take the throne in Bohemia. And once that does, you've got a very unique move, which very few people actually do. I'm just going to accept these alliances right now. These are essentially the lectors of the HRE, by and large. Brandenburg, the Palatinate. Ideally, I'd want to get Saxony, but I don't know if Saxony, hates Brandenburg. But the key for me right now is just to keep an eye on Bohemia. I don't know how many months it tends to take, but once it does, we have to act fairly quickly. I know this is going to be a guide just on ideas and stuff, but this is a pretty sneaky little thing to do that not many people do, unless they really know how to do it well. And so I'm just going to quickly show you how to do it. So you have till, I think it's 1490 to reconquer Italy. So you can actually afford to spend time dealing with Bohemia, etc., etc., and Venice, which is going to take a couple wars to take all the land you need, and the Pope. The Pope tends to be the hardest part for reigning in northern Italy. I have a guide on that, so I'm not going to go terribly into depth on that. You can look it up. It's a quick way to rein it in. Things have changed a little bit, but it's not that outdated. Oh, come on, just find a... Get a new ruler on the throne, please. Let's see. Other things is, as Austria, one has a larger force limit than expected. Although I'm a little confused why my army is so weak all of a sudden. It's almost like I'm missing an army. Huh. Well, that's a bit frustrating. I wonder if I accidentally did something when I was loading this up. Anyway, we're raising lots of money there. Still don't have our dynasty on that throne. Okay, well there we go. So, Vaclav von Habsburg is 21. If he dies, Bohemia gets inherited by Hungary, which is annoying, but as I was saying, we now have Ladasis Postumus von Habsburg on the throne of Hungary. And he will either die before he comes of age or he'll come of age. In fact, I think in this case he'll come of age because they didn't put Hunyadi over here, Janos Hunyadi, in charge. So I don't think his dynasty can take over, but it might. So Ladasis here will either come of age and there'll be an Austrian on the throne, or he'll die and the Hunyadi or another Hungarian noble will take over. But Bohemia. So we now have our dynasty on the throne of Bohemia. Obviously, I'm not going to do it because for some reason I messed up the army start. But you can go and do something that's very rare. You can claim their throne. Once you claim their throne, you're going to want to declare war on them for their throne. Normally, I'm in a better place for this. So if you do this, raise more armies. But you can do this, declare claim on throne. Take the capital. If you take the capital, you will form a personal union, which will give you control of Bohemia. Bohemia will also still have Silesia as a vassal. And more importantly, Bohemia is an elector, which means they will vote for you in the next HRE election, assuming relations are good. And they'll also provide like 20 troops to any further wars you may do in like northern Italy, which can come in fairly handy. You should be able to win that war, assuming you have a large amount of troops, which I don't, so I'm not going to do it. But you can usually beat them, and they're only usually allied to some minor nations like Württemberg and Ferrara, both of which you could stomp. In fact, assuming Ferrara joins the call to arms in this case, you'd want to take their, you might consider vassalizing them because that gives you a route into the HRE and more territory and allies to fight both Venice and the Pope with them. But that's irrelevant. So that's quickly how you can get a union over Bohemia. Later on there is a mission, which is Bohemia must accept Austrian overlordship that one can do, which will also give you the same essential claim to retake and take over their land and union them. Later on, Hungary, as I said, Ladasis will either come of age or die. If he dies and the Hunyadi's take over, or another noble, you will get a mission that will essentially allow you to do what I just did to Bohemia on Hungary. Made a little bit more difficult because you're usually allied to them. But in that case, you can just dissolve the alliance, wait 5 to 10 years. Your Kazai Bell is long enough. Then declare war, take their capital, beat their armies, to get a union. So probably I would say by 1460, you could have a personal union over Bohemia and Hungary. That's the ideal start. And once you have those, in between the war between Bohemia and trying to take Hungary's throne, you would try and take Venice's lands. If you take land from Venice, give Brescia here to Milan. Take these 3 if you can afford it. Be very careful of coalition because you've just taken a stupid amount of land. And then start prepping for a war with the Pope. Probably going to need 2 wars because the Pope has 105 province war score, and you need all their land. Another option is ally yourself to Florence and use them to take some of the Pope's lands as well. Anyway, that's all I'm going to do on that. Go watch my other video on that if you need help, or leave a comment below. So, other things for Austria. Austria starts off with some really nice traditions. Most of them turn out to be oriented, their ideas overall, towards diplomacy, but their initial starting ideas aren't bad. They get +10 morale of armies and +30 improved relations, which is really good. The improved relations helps a lot, and the morale is rather unusual for a starting nation. The only nations I think of that have morale as a starting idea are Castile and Burgundy, which means, at least initially, you're stronger than, say, France, assuming your force limit's large. Your next idea is one assuming you want to do what Austria is meant to do and form the HRE. You have Imperial Ambition, plus 10% Imperial Growth modifier, and negative 15% diplomatic annexation cost, which means for Austria, most of the time it's actually beneficial to vassalize nations and then diplomatically annex them rather than taking them with just taking their land and using admin power to core them. In fact, it usually works out that it's actually cheaper in total monarch power to do it that way. Plus you get all those lands free of unrest when you annex them from your vassal. And of course you'll take other ideas to reduce that further. Your next idea is negative 10 fort maintenance and plus 15% national garrison growth, the military frontier. It's nice. It's not a really super strong idea. It will make maintaining forts easier. It will also mean that your forts get back up to full garrisons faster. Not the biggest priority in the world, especially now that you using the military tradition mechanics. Once you get it high enough to 40%, you may refill the garrison with your army anyway. The third Austrian idea is pretty good. You have the Fugger banking, which is yearly inflation reduction 0.05 and interest per annum negative 0.5, which means your loans are cheaper and inflation is reduced. Now that is very important because Austria, unlike most nations in Europe other than Bohemia and Hungary and Castile and Serbia, starts with a gold mine. Tyrol is probably your most valuable province. I know most people think the capital of Vienna here is very, very important, or Vienna. It's the name of the city to English speakers. Is important, but it's not as important as Tyrol overall to your finances. So you've got gold, which means just from gold alone right now we're almost getting 2 gold a month. However, we can up the gold production, and actually I can't do it right now, but ideally you want to get it up to about 9 or 10. If you go over 10, the chance of the gold mine expiring goes up considerably. And if you put it up there, you'll be getting like 5-6 gold a month. 6 gold a month from gold. Which will help pay a lot of your debts and make you absurdly wealthy. However, on the downside, it will be giving you inflation per year. Even with the third Austrian idea, it won't stop it completely, but it will at least rein it in. And one, of course, can always take a admin advisor that reduces inflation, take the papal idea, which reduces inflation, forgive usury, or take economic ideas, or just grow so large that the inflation from gold is not a huge factor, which means that gold as a percentage of your income has to fall. Your fourth idea is Habsburg dominance, which is +2 diplomatic reputation, and if I'm not wrong, that is the strongest diplomatic reputation idea in the game. I'm pretty sure it is, and it means that you will have much better chances to get personal unions, treaties, annexation will go faster, integration will go faster, the odds of getting your dynasty on their throne in a personal union will go up. Essentially, it makes all diplomacy go really well. Fifth idea, Edict of Restitution, +2 missionary strength, is quite handy, assuming one stays Catholic and is fighting the Protestants, or even if one goes Protestant, has to convert their lands. It's just a nice little cleanup of some of the religious stuff. Besides, you'll get it usually after the religious wars. The Protestant Catholic leagues will usually form about the time you get your third idea. So just putting that in perspective, that's about 15, maybe 60, and then it'll drag on for a while. Your sixth idea is +1 diplomatic relations for Austrian court. Again, that allows you to maintain another relation, which is quite useful. That will give you a base of 4 rather than 3. In this case, we already have an additional, I think it's 1 because we're the emperor. And your last idea is, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Hofkriegsrat. I have no idea. It's your ministry for war. It'll give you +3 discipline, +the 30% reinforced speed. It's nice. The discipline is kind of handy, but it's a smaller discipline boost than pretty much everyone else's. And the reinforced speed is actually more useful because it means your armies will recover faster and you can throw them into the fray more often. Plus it means it's a little harder for them to get stack wiped because they'll be rebuilding their army once they retreat faster. And the final one for Austria is chance of new heir plus 50%. This sounds wonderful. It'll give you 50% chance of another heir. However, the Habsburgs have a wonderful little mechanic, which is if any other dynasty takes their throne, you'll get an event that'll say, do we want to stay with the new dynasty or do we want to go back to the Habsburgs? So you can always have a Habsburg on the throne if you do it right. On the other hand, it will allow you to get heirs that are somewhat related to your ruler stats, which can be quite useful. In terms of, let's do expansion first. So obviously you can do Bohemia, Hungary, personal unions. You can try and invade Italy for raiding in northern Italy. But another area to look at is over here in the Burgundian French region, and in general in the HRE in total. Switzerland here is the first one I'll talk about. Switzerland usually doesn't have allies. In fact, the fact they're allied to France and Ravensburg is a bit unusual. They usually don't have allies, and they're a small enough nation, they're below 100% war score, that usually if they have no allies, you can put a claim on them, attack them, conquer them, and either vassalize them or take enough province here to connect to your rather outlying province of Sundagau. I have no idea how to pronounce these names. Just total honesty here. I have no idea how to pronounce them. And that helps a lot, because otherwise this province on its own you can't get to without military access to Switzerland or Ravensburg and Baden, which is quite useful. Now, Burgundy, as I said earlier, is a problem for imperial unity or imperial authority. The other one that's quite annoying is Provence here. They have a junior partner in Lorraine, which counts as Lorraine not being part of the HRE, plus they control Boros here, or Bar. And you'll want to deal with them at some point. Usually, Provence and them will go to war. Provence and Lorraine will end up at war with Burgundy, and sometimes France will get dragged in, etc., etc. If Provence loses their alliance with France, because they start out with one, they're another really good target to attack, declare war on, and try and take Lorraine and release. There's a province here, a country here called Bar you can release, or just take it yourself. And that'll give you more imperial authority per month. Imperial authority, of course, is very important if you're the emperor, because you need 50 to pass a reform, and the more member states that are in the HRE, the better. As you can see right now, start of the game, there's 16 provinces that are not under the control of member states, which reduces imperial authority by 0.08 every month, which is quite painful. Otherwise, this would be going up a lot quicker. Quick rundown, those are the Burgundians and Provence, Lorraine area, but there's also up here at the beginning of the game, Neumark was controlled by the Teutonic Order, which is now switched to, they've sold it to Brandenburg, and Holstein up here, which there's pretty much no way for you to get outside of a war with Denmark, and right now Denmark's stronger than you. Maybe if you had Bohemia, Hungary, and another ally, you could take them on, but it's best saying that province is a lost cause and just ignoring it. It's not too impactful to imperial authority. So what I was saying over here, whether or not you take Switzerland, whether or not you attack Lorraine and Provence, there's the chance for the Burgundian succession against Burgundy. Chances of getting it go up if you have a royal marriage with them. Obviously I can't because they hate me. And if I remember, the actual trigger for the event is Burgundy is losing a either offensive or defensive war. Essentially they have to have a negative, I think it's negative 25% war score, and it has to occur before 1500. If it does, there's a chance that their current ruler will die, their heir will die, and their lands will be divided among I think it's the strongest military nation in Europe, and France usually, or the most diplomatically influential. It's skewed towards Austria and Castile, because Castile historically controlled this area, but Austria too. And essentially when it fires, the personal unions of Burgundy and the vassal of Burgundy here, Rethels, will all be integrated into the new country, or you can release them, which means if you get it, you will all of a sudden acquire Brabant, Holland, Flanders. I don't know if you get Nevers, but you do get these two provinces as well, and Luxembourg and Franche Comté or whatever over here. France will pick up 4 or 5 provinces as well, which will put you immediately on the border and hostile to France usually, but it will give you a lot of land that once you get it, you can immediately add it to a state, which will give you full income from it because it will not raise the autonomy. That's important once you do because there's a lot of forts in that area, and if you don't, you will start losing money. But if you get that, or once you get that, then of course you'll get events that will tell you to go to war with France to defend the Low Countries, which are this region. Those are usually fairly good ones. Of course, taking on France is easier said than done. Outside of that, there's really not many other places to expand except into the HRE. The way I play it, I used to play it diplomatically, try to get unions and vassals, but I find that usually doesn't work to get the HRE all of the reforms passed. So what I find the best move is to try and take out small nations in the south or large nations like Bavaria and either encapsulate them, like take these 2 provinces from Bavaria, leave Salzburg alone, and in general just grow your power base in the HRE, because once the religious wars and leagues start, your imperial authority will be 0 for a long time anyway. I have yet to see a legitimate, easy way of getting imperial authority reforms passed before the religious leagues. Once the religious leagues fire, if you've got Bohemia as a union, they will not convert to Protestant, which eliminates this area from a center of Reformation. So usually it'll start up here, Brandenburg, Saxony, or one of these northern provinces, but there's a chance it fires in one of these southern provinces. The Reformation has a very high chance of firing in this area, specifically Switzerland, which means in terms of ideas, sometimes it's worth picking up religious ideas as your second or third idea group so that you can declare war on them pretty much immediately, forcefully convert them, and eliminate the center of Reformation, which cripples the Protestant and Reformed Reformation movements. And then after that, you can go around enforcing religious unity, conquering nations, forcefully converting them to Catholicism, and go on. It's important to note that if you convert to Protestantism before the Catholic is the dominant faith changes, you will lose your emperorship, assuming you still are emperor. And other things to deal with the HRE, you have to deal with the electors. Not going to go too far into that. Suffice to say, keep improving relations with them, have alliances with them. A really nice tactic I have found is go under them, go to diplomatic feedback, and say, I will not join offensive wars. Usually they will still keep you as an ally, but it will prevent them from dragging you into multiple wars inside the HRE. As the human player, you can't really call Austria into your offensive wars, but if I remember correctly, the AI can, which is really annoying when, say, Mainz here goes on a conquering spree, but it's actually usually Cologne up here. We'll conquer this whole region and get tons of enemies, and you'll get dragged into fights and unlawful territory. I advise pretty much if somebody gets a province, it's unlawful territory, and you don't want them to have it, do the enforce unlawful territory emperor one. Demand unlawful territory. Even if they don't accept it, it will give them a +10 unrest in that province, which will make it almost certain they'll have a rebellion or at least have to spend time controlling it. Of course, if they rise up, there's a chance the country will get their independence again. But also, if they don't accept it, it will give you a causa belli to attack them. Causa belli, I guess, technically, to attack them. And you can then attack them. You can sometimes even vassalize them, but you can release the nations they just conquered. I advise you do that a fair amount, especially if you've got Bohemia and Hungary. There's pretty much no alliance in the HRE that can stop you, which is really awesome. In other areas, once you've dealt with Bohemia and they've annexed Silesia and you've integrated them, whether or not you want to is a whole other issue, then you can always try expanding east into Poland, but we're talking mid to late game. Also, once you've integrated Hungary, which I advise you probably to do, you'll get missions to drive back the Ottomans, conquer Bosnia, Serbia, Wallachia, Albania, everything that's over here, which will give you a late game expansion route. Plus, let's see if I can pull this up. In terms of regions, you can, it's not going to show me. Europe continues according to the game out to is it out to here? It's like right out here. You can add all this land here into the HRE. And of course, once you add a province to the empire, that will give you +1 imperial authority and allows you to get closer and closer to reforms. I advise you not adding lands to the HRE unless you're sure you're going to get a reform passed, because otherwise you'll lose it once the religious leagues start. And you want to try and invest either as much or as little as possible into imperial authority before the Reformation stuff fires. If you do it, if you can get a reform pass, get a reform pass, because I have yet to see, or I've let to have happen to me, the AIs actually declare war to repeal reforms. I suppose it could happen if all of a sudden Ansbach became emperor, but they're unlikely to. In terms of rivals for the diplomatic game, you're pretty much looking at Hesse, Saxony, Bohemia if it's independent, and Brandenburg. Those tend to be the other ones that are either well-liked, well-allianced, or have diplomatic ideas or traditions that aid them. Now, in terms of idea groups, actually before I do that quickly, you usually want to get a diplomatic reputation advisor and probably keep them around. Diplomatic reputation also helps with getting elected to the emperor, as is being a large nation, being allied, having high legitimacy, and having high prestige, all of which, except for the high prestige, Austria will do pretty easily. Of course, if you're emperor, you automatically will have some prestige, which is a nice benefit. Also, prestige helps with unions and royal marriages, etc., etc. So you want to try and get that in diplomatic reputation as high as possible. In terms of ideas, people are usually torn over what's the best starting ideas for Austria. I tend towards going for influence ideas over diplomatic ideas. Some people say diplomatic ideas is great because of the additional diplomat, reputation, improved relations, relation slots, war score costs, and just overall lowered impact on stability from diplomatic actions. I'll just quickly clarify what that means. That means if you do a royal marriage with somebody and then you're trying to get, say, your dynasty on their throne because they have no legal heir, then they get an heir. What it will allow you to do is to break the royal marriage. Normally when you break a royal marriage, you lose 1 stability and a certain amount of prestige. With the completed diplomatic ideas, it will mean you will only lose the prestige, not the stability, which is huge. So, I tend to go for influence ideas, mainly for the aggressive expansion reduction, which if you can get early on will make taking Italy to prevent the Shadow Kingdom a lot easier, and any other wars you may take land in. The tribute income from vassals, not the biggest or the most useful thing for Austria, but the increased prestige and the chance of new heir is very nice. That will give you, once you complete all your days, plus 75% chance of new heir plus any royal marriage you'll get, which will help a lot. But also the diplomatic annexation cost of -25% stacks nicely with their -15% to give you -40% cost of diplomatic annexation, which saves you tons of diplomatic points when integrating vassals. As I said earlier, you sometimes just want to vassal the nation and annex them later, and overall it'll save you admin monarch points from coring. So I recommend usually influence. Some people say diplomatic. It's really up to you. The other real option is going defensive or offensive ideas. If you do, I'd say defensive because the morale stacks with your tradition morale and will give you plus 25% early on, which is huge. It pretty much means you can take on relatively anybody unless they outnumber you heavily and beat them in the battles. Whether or not you win the war due to manpower is another concern. Plus, you'll also get fort maintenance and fort defense, which will stack with your negative fort maintenance here to give you, I think, 20% cheaper or so. Plus, some of your forts, really Karnat's here and Tyrol, and if you take over Switzerland, are located on mountains, so their defensiveness is already 25%. Once you add in defensive ideas, we're looking at 45% fort defense, which is pretty good, plus any prestige or anything else that affects that, which means these forts become a lot harder to take, which is key because once Tyrol is occupied, you'll lose the gold income, which the AIs will target relentlessly. That is usually the most taken province for you as Austria. And if they take it, it'll of course cripple your income because you're getting a lot of money from gold. For your second idea, of course, if you haven't take diplomatic or influence or defensive. Offensive is nice if you're fighting little wars in the HRE, increased siege ability, larger army, plus morale, better generals. I don't tend to take offensive. That's pretty much what it is. For your third idea, now this gets tricky. About this time, actually, for your second idea, you've got another choice, which is to go religious. I'm actually tending these days to go more religious than military in some ways. Really, you want this last idea, Deus Vult, which will allow you to declare war on either heathens and heretics without fabricating a claim. That's key because if you're trying to unite the HRE into a single country, you'll have to survive the Protestant Catholic leagues, and being able to declare war on them as soon as a Center of Reformation forms and they convert is really key, because then once you do it, you can forcefully convert them back and eliminate the Center of Reformation, or you can take it yourself, and owing to the +3 missionary strength and divine supremacy, and if you've got a missionary inquisitor advisor, you can then convert the province of Reformation before it actually converts other provinces, which really does stop the Reformation hard. I've done it to the Reformed faith once, and they got nowhere. In fact, they weren't even in the game 10 years after the Reformed faith started. In that game, Protestantism turned out to be a little bit harder than I suspected, but I beat them nonetheless. Sorry, first of all, for this guide running so long, but Austria is a very complex country with lots of things. Other ideas that you'll want to take, obviously, the other options is humanist if you don't want to necessarily get high imperial authority. This will stop any issues really with Protestants and Catholics and Reformed faith in your land, and plus it'll give you more religious unity, increased harass, and cheaper ideas, plus it'll allow you to take over the land easier, which is good, but I recommend religious. Other ideas worth note, economic ideas for the inflation reduction and all the other amazing benefits it gives you. Late game, you're probably going to want to snag quantity so you can compete with the great powers of like France, Ottomans, Russia, etc. You probably want to pick up whichever of the diplomatic ideas you haven't, either diplomatic or influence, finish those off. Outside of that, I think the only one that might be vaguely useful is, if I remember, I'm trying to remember which it is. One of the ideas in the game, if you take it, here we go. Is this it? Let me just quickly glance through it. I don't actually remember what it is. Here we go. For influence ideas, if you look on the second one, administrative ideas will give you a negative 20% diplomatic annexation cost, which would put it up to 60. Of course, you have to go down here where it's a lot of mercenary ideas, but the interest will stack with your interest reduction. The core cost is nice, plus the number of states, and admin tech cost is handy as well, which means this is another one if you're playing a diplomatic vassal game you'll want to pick up, because 20% is huge. So I think other than that, it's worth noting that Austria is not an elector. They're just a normal feudal monarchy despite the name of Archduchy. Of course, that might change or not in a future patch. If you annex Bohemia, you will not become an elector. It used to be, but apparently they've changed that. You want to maintain as many electors in free cities as you can to increase the imperial authority. A good rule of thumb is you should be able to get 1, if not 2, reforms passed before the Protestant Reformation kills your imperial authority. Other things to note, the Teutonic Order may in fact join the HRE once they've been beaten up by Poland. The new patches and stuff will allow nations to join the HRE. If you beat up Venice here, take their lands, and the Pope's lands, I've noticed that Bosnia, Serbia, Albania, and any other surviving nations over here will tend to jump and join the HRE. Sometimes Provence will do it if they're beaten up. Obviously, the Italian nations will either stay in it or leave. If they leave, it'll be everybody Savoy, Milan, Venice, South. Switzerland will stay in the HRE. Any vassals of yours will also stay in the HRE. So other than that, allies to look at for Austria, you want allies with Castile. There's an event that if you're both rival to France, that your dynasty will take over or will be their heir and has a chance of taking over their throne, which can lead to personal unions. But overall, just in general leads to another Habsburg on a throne. France should largely be your rival. You'll probably never get along with them well. Ottomans should almost always be your enemy. Poland's unique case, once they get their elective monarchy, you have a high enough diplomatic reputation and enough advisors that you can usually win the election. If you can, support the heir, win the election, get a huge amount of all monarch points, which is really nice. You can also try and get personal unions with Brandenburg and Saxony, or the Palatinate. I think those are the only 3 electors that are monarchies, which means actually getting along well with the other monastic orders or theocracies here are pretty key to winning elections. Plus, they don't tend to convert away from Catholicism if they can help it. Last thing of note, if you have a personal union with an elector or you vassalize them, if you vassalize them, there will be an imperial authority penalty. But if you're union with them, there is not. But in both cases, the electors will have a negative 50 opinion of you towards the next election, called controlling other electors. As Austria, that's not a problem. I think it's 2 diplomatic reputation kind of outweighs that, 2 or 3. So you should do fine. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. Otherwise, that will be it for this guide. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I have other guides. I also do Let's Plays with this, so let me know any nations you'd like guides of or potential Let's Plays of. Thank you. Bye for now.